Hey guys, just a quick update here since last time. Made a lot of good progress. A lot of the stuff were bugs. It's kind of hard to show, but I have a list of a lot of different bugs. I don't use anything fancy like Trello or any of those online systems. I started with a spreadsheet, and I'm pretty much just want to finish it in a spreadsheet. But just to give you an idea of things, all these things, obviously, a lot of them were features and bugs have been squashed, and a lot of them lately have been completely done. Things with the camera when you're going on the track that have been bugging me, bugs that crash the editor, issues with the AI, etc. So really, really good progress. I'm actually really happy with where I am. So today I wanted to show you just a few more improvements to the AI since last week, and I feel like very, very soon I'll be able to finally show you a full run through of Corneria. I know I've been showing you all these different things, but I'm hoping that when you finally see the video of me just playing the level just from start to finish, you can see how all of the different components that I've added over the months, literally, everything adds together, right? All the enemy AI, all the obstacles, the destructible buildings, the menus, the save systems, the checkpoint systems, everything. So last week I showed you some really good performance improvements by adding a distance where the AI would be just completely inactive, right? So before, the original system had two states: idle, which is basically the normal state, and then engaged state, which is you detected the player, then you need to do something. Which is, you can see here on my right hand side, I'm selecting the enemy spawner here. So you have idle behavior, you would have something like stay in place, patrol route, or move to random location, which is what I have in this volume here. And then engage behavior is where you have really the options here. So I'm going to have ignore behavior. Now before, you only had the option of putting combat range and player sensing range. But now I added inactive distance. So before, it was a multiplier, and you had to modify the multiplier on the actual AI controller here, search for player, which means that any multiplier was going to propagate to pretty much all of the AI. So what I did now is, no, now you actually have the option of showing the inactive distance per enemy, which means that some enemies you may want them to be inactive for longer, or some enemies you may want them to be active closer, right? So you actually have the option now. And this is actually a lot easier because it's a distance, right? So 60,000, I think it's a lot more, if I click play here, it's a lot more easily to understand than a factor, right? So you can see here, the enemy is completely inactive. It's not moving. It's supposed to be moving within the volume, but because we're so far within that, we're farther than 60,000 Unreal units, it was inactive. And now you see it starts moving because my ship is actually closer. So now we went from inactive to idle behavior. And if I possess here, and eventually I get really, really close, it would then go to engage behavior. In this case, it's ignore. But if I had something like chase and shoot, then it will start chasing me. So really small change, but when I was coding it, it made sense to just have it as a multiplier. In my mind, I was like, it makes it easier, one less thing you have to adjust. But ultimately, I think this looks really intimidating, a lot of settings, but once you know what everything means, you can tweak these a lot more, right? So default is 60,000. You can make it 100,000, you can make it whatever, but whatever you put in here is going to affect just the specific pawn when it's spawned, right? So now every single enemy can have its own inactive distance, as well as the player sensing and combat range. So that's one thing. But then I thought about something else. Well, even more performant would be to not even have the enemy spawn if you're really far. Why have the enemy spawn even if it's on idle? It's still running, right? The behavior tree is still running. It's just hitting, it's checking every frame the condition, whether it's active or inactive, and it's just doing nothing, right? That's obviously better than doing idle, but it would be even better if it didn't even spawn, right? So that's the next thing I added is, if you go here, you'll see that there is a spawn method drop down. So now you have an additional spawn method, which is proximity. So active means the enemy spawner will spawn the enemy on begin play. Inactive means it will not do anything. It'll wait for the spawn manager. And if you recall, gosh, it's been more than a month now, but I showed you guys a spawn manager that can then target the specific spawners and do different things. This way you can combine waves for bosses, etc. So that's what inactive does. Proximity is exactly what it sounds like. Now we have an enemy spawner has a, and I'll show trigger here, has triggers. And you can see here, I have two triggers. I have a sphere trigger and I have a box collision trigger. And now what this does is it'll actually spawn the enemy when you overlap the trigger. So now it's even more performant, right? So enemies that are really far at the end of the level, you can select them as proximity and you can make the sphere radius really big, or whatever you feel is important, right? Say you're turning a corner, so you make sure that the sphere is just right there as the player should be seeing the enemies. That's when you spawn them. But this is, again, even better. I bet if I went back to the stress test and I made a proximity, all the enemies in the back wouldn't even spawn until you're closer. So let's just quickly test this right now. So I'm using the sphere trigger. If I click play, no enemy. And as I overlap the sphere trigger, then it spawns the enemy. And of course, once the enemy is spawned, all of these conditions still apply, right? So you could still spawn it and have it inactive, and then go from inactive to active to combat. So you have a lot of different things to play around with, and you have both. You can either use a sphere or you can use a box trigger. Either one will work, and I included both. And obviously, when you have a bunch of this, it's going to clutter your level with a bunch of huge spheres, which is why I included this little check. Once you have the right size, you can just hide the trigger. That way, working on the editor is just a lot nicer. It makes perfect sense now that you think about it, but when I was coding it, I just figured, okay, well, it'll spawn and then just make it inactive. So just one more thing, again, for performance reasons. If you use this method, it doesn't matter if you're a mid-range PC, you can have literally hundreds and hundreds of enemies spawning at the right time, and they're just not clogging the, the game by just being there inactive or just idling where nobody's seeing them. One more thing I wanted to show. Let me just go back to active real quick so it just spawns. There is the chase and shoot behavior, which is, I'm going to put it right here, basically chasing the enemy and shooting. Simple as that, right? But if you recall one of the videos, when you have a lot of enemies, say 5, 6, 7, whatever, and they're all chasing and shooting you, it's really hard to shake them because they're just constantly chasing you, right? So I added a new behavior here, which is basically that it will stop randomly. So every once in a while, the AI will just stop for a little bit and then continue. And that doesn't make a lot of sense when you have one AI. So right now, I'm gonna have it stop randomly, no, so it's gonna chase and shoot. And if I just click play here, you'll see that the AI is just chasing me, right? It's just chasing and chasing and chasing. And obviously it has really crappy accuracy because I have the regular lasers, so you can make them homing missiles if you want, and it'll always hit you, for example. But the AI is always chasing you. Oops. And if you have one enemy or 2 or 3, that's fine. But what happens when you have 10 enemies and you're fighting in a kind of arena and you have a bunch of enemies? So what I did is I included this, and I'm going to just put these for debugging purposes here. Now you can select if you want them to stop randomly, for how long you want them to spawn, and the % chance for them to spawn. Right, so right now I have a 5% chance for them to spawn and to stop, and if they do stop, they stop for 2 seconds. So let me make this chance 50%, which is ridiculous, but just so you can see. You can see at the top left corner moving, not moving, and then not moving, right? And then it's just stopping there, not moving, and eventually it'll move. There you go, moving. So obviously I would never put something like 50% chance. And then not moving. But something like 5%, and then you can select how long it stops for 2 seconds. Something like 5% or 10%, like 0.1, right? 10% may make a difference, right? So what happens if I just clone this? Oops. Right. Then you'll notice exactly what I'm talking about and why stopping randomly actually probably makes the game a bit easier for the player. So if I just hit play here, so obviously you can see some of them are stopping, some of them are following you. So trying to fight these guys now makes it a little bit easier. Oops. So play around with the with the settings. This is just, again, an effort to make the AI a bit easier for the player and to give you a chance to retaliate, right? If all of these guys were constantly following me and shooting me, right? And right now they're pretty inaccurate, right? They're just shooting the regular lasers. But if you wanted to make it hard and you wanted to make them homing missiles, it would be a lot harder for them to target me, right? Of course, you can increase their acceleration to make sure that they're always sticking around. But it does make a difference, and at the end of the day, for games like Star Fox and Panzer Dragoon, a regular enemy is almost like fodder, right? They're there for the player to kill quickly because it's not a boss, right? You don't want them to be super smart. You want them to be okay to chase the player, shoot, stop a little bit, go around, but they're just one enemy out of hundreds that you may have in the level. So that helps out a bit. And again, the default for me that I felt really good was 5%. Obviously, you don't have to use it. You can just uncheck this and have the enemies always chase and shoot, and that's fine. Again, more options for you in your game. So I think that's all I wanted to show today. I know not very exciting, but just trust me, there's a lot of improvement since last week. There's just bugs that there's no point showing you. But I feel like I'm very close to showcasing that full run through, and very close to actually submitting an initial version of the template to Epic. And then, since it's gonna take about 2 months, 2 to 3 months sometimes, in those 2 to 3 months, I'm going to continue polishing it, and then I'm going to get whoever decides to buy it on itch.io can give me feedback, and then I can polish it even more, and then maybe even add some things, right? So I have a few things that I like to add, but they're just not high priority right now. For example, I like to add a quality options menu. I think it's important, and I don't have it on my menu system. That should be fairly easy. It just takes time to add. Or add like a the HUD system for the radar. I like to convert it to a widget. I think I know how to, but I have to experiment. Right now that's just in HUD format. So these are features, for example, that I haven't been able to implement there in the future. Things like that's actually done. Save selected options, like a level select screen that's marked in the future. I love to do that again. Following games like Star Fox, you don't just go from one level to the other. You have like a little map and you can select your route, etc. So things like that I love to have at some point, but I'm not going to be part of the initial release. Things like add more behaviors, like circle the player, for example, so it's not just chase and shoot and chase. So those things are coming later, but for the initial release, I just want to have all of the bugs squashed and a fully playable game that you can actually, utilize to get you started. So hopefully you like where this is going. Let me know what you think, and look forward to very soon a full walkthrough or a full playthrough of Corneria, finally showing how everything's coming together. So really excited. Let me know what you think, and I'll talk to you later.